So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue with the panel discussion this afternoon. And I will have to explain to you what the Trainers Meet Professionals says in the title, although it doesn't appear on the slide. It's a program series that we offer at BME, usually online, and we try to address a certain issue where market representatives can meet our students and our trainers, and we sometimes have trainers meet trainer sessions as well, when the different colleagues from different universities sit together and discuss issues. At this time, we thought it would be more market representatives, but as I look around, I can see that everybody is a practicing interpreter. Almost everyone is a trainer. And most of us do research as well, so it's not like a mixed bag. We have very much the same background, but I don't think that should be a problem, because what we need to talk about is the human in the loop aspect, and this is what the first question is going to be about. But before we do that, I'm going to ask each and every participant to introduce themselves. I was going to introduce them, but I have talked so much today, so I'm just going to, there is a mic you can pass around, and I'm not going to part with mine. Marta, you can go first.
Thank you very much. Does it work?
They can do the volume. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. So my name is Márta Seresi. I represent Eötvös Loránd University, ELTE, Budapest, where I teach consecutive and simultaneous interpreting. I am the EMCI course coordinator for ELTE. I also do research. My main area of interest is conference interpreting, remote interpreting, new technologies in conference interpreting, and I'm also an EU accredited interpreter. So, thank you.
I'm Anne-Catherine Gieshoff. I'm currently heading the Professorship for Interpreting Studies at Zurich University of Applied Sciences in Switzerland. And we have, I think, similar research interests also. I love also anything that is extended realities and anything that is a little bit crazy. That's kind of my stuff, I think. Yeah, that's all.
My name is Franz Pöchacker from the University of Vienna. I was a conference and media interpreter for some 30 years, and now I'm only an academic at the university, supervising research and teaching in the area of interpreting studies.
So my name is Michaela Albe-Mikasa, and I was the head of the interpreting studies section at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences until August. This year, I was responsible for conference and community interpreting, but mainly for the theoretical interpreting studies part of things, less so for the practical part. We have our own trainers and heads of that section. And I did some interpreting in the booth for about 5 years, but that's a long time back.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Veronika Vaspal. I'm from here as well. I'm a freelance interpreter, and I'm here to represent the Hungarian Association of Translators and Interpreters, Magyar Fordítók és Tolmácsok Egyesülete, MFTE. So whenever I use this abbreviation, MFTE, I refer to our association. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, everyone, for the brief introduction. And the first question is going to be something like a spoiler, because what the end message should be about, the importance of human characters and important human factors. We are going to start with this, or I thought we should start with this, because the students, at the end of the day, will have to present a so-called hackathon. And I heard that they have more arguments for AI at the moment, so we should give them some food for thought to have, some more ideas why humans are important. And especially in the field of interpreting, I think we can say a few things. What sort of unique contributions humans make that machines cannot replicate. So if you had to make the case for keeping human interpreters, what would you emphasize? And I'm just going to invite you to say one thing that the students could list in their argumentation. Anyone can speak up why it is important to keep humans in the interpreting business. Anyone?
Thank you very much. I think everybody always talks about emotional intelligence, but I think there is another factor that is very important, and it's coherence. I think that machines cannot oversee a whole line of reasoning through several minutes of speech, actually, and now I think it's a huge advantage for humans because we are able to follow through a line of reasoning, and it also means that we are able to monitor our output, and we can realize if we made a mistake, but machines are not able to do so. So I think machine interpreting nowadays is like very at the level of the segments, and it's like giving each segment to a different interpreter with the same professional skills and with the same background knowledge, but an interpreter who didn't hear the previous sentence, nor the original, and the translation of it. So it can work for a while, but I think it will lead to problems.
Just that, thank you for putting it so well. Coherence is an important aspect, maybe very closely linked to that, based on what you've said, is consistency, especially when it comes to terminology. Apparently learning from legal translation scholars, even not even interpreting, it's AI translation is a problem with regard to consistent use of specialized terminology. So consistency, and while I'm at it, also what we heard this morning from our programmer turned philosopher, author, colleague, the accountability, taking responsibility for the mistakes made or correcting them or acknowledging them. So those are a couple of powerful arguments, I would say.
You want to?
Thank you. I would highlight the elements of non-verbal communication, cultural differences, which we know or we feel, cultural subtleties, nuances, humor, innuendo, references, local terminology or client-specific or local-specific terminology, day-specific or even mood-specific, client-specific terminology, things that I feel or things that are being maybe not said by words, but are being felt or meant by words and by the overall expression of the speaker. Just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe our student friends, they should maybe listen to some highly seasoned interpreters and then listen to a speech done by a machine interpreting, and they would themselves notice the difference. And for instance, I showed a seasoned interpreter interpreting a conference presentation that was interpreted by Kudo, and the spontaneous reaction was, well, if every speaker was speaking so well, so nicely articulated, so clear, obviously the machine can do it, but speakers are not like this. Speakers are not disciplined. Speakers, they don't even sometimes complete their sentences, and sometimes, they just speak haywire, and you have to try and make sense of it. I think the very kind of well-spoken stuff can be done by the machine, and also I think there's a misconception in that. When you think of the machine, it's very much thinking of code to code. If you see a seasoned interpreter who really gets into it, who has a lot of empathy for the speaker, for whatever is happening, and then also the head of our, as I mentioned, the practical interpreting section, he says, I can read between the lines. No machine can read between the lines. And you need that for a full interpreting day when things are at stake that are important, when it's not just about factual, technical facts and matters. You really have to see what things are really about, what the speaker is going on about, what he's at, what he wants to, what the intention is. Unless you have a feeling, an instinct for that, you can't do a good interpreting. And I think there are worlds apart between what a good seasoned interpreter can do and what the machine can do, and you should just listen and compare the two. And then I'm sure you would come up with your own analysis of the differences.
Thank you. And maybe to add on everything that has been said, prosody, certainly. You can use your voice, right, to help information processing. I think that's also an interesting aspect. And then more like in community interpreting, what we hear from healthcare professionals is personal contact. So the fact how important it is to have a person on site here with you actually to build a trust relationship. And maybe a last point that comes to mind is adaptability. It's also more like a community interpreting thing that I'm thinking of, but you can, as an interpreter, you can choose whether you will go into dialogue interpreting, consecutive interpreting, or maybe if the situation is the situation actually asks for simultaneous interpreting or whispering. For instance, if you don't want to interrupt the narrative of a patient, I mean, in psychotherapy, for instance, you as an interpreter, you can decide, you can switch. A machine cannot switch in that moment, and that might be difficult then in the therapeutic process.
Very good. Maybe just the final point that has not been mentioned today, segmentation and pausing. When a speaker speaks, the machine has no way of knowing whether it was the end of the sentence or there was just a little interruption or something, so that's typically a problem.
And just for the students, please make a distinction between conference interpreting, where you have a monological presentation, which is being translated and which are interpreted and which maybe the machine may find easier, and dialogue interpreting in hospitals, in the court or wherever, where you have speakers taking turns, and that is very difficult. The machine and even Fantinoli, who was mentioned a couple of times today, who is kind of the big shot in interpreting technologies. He's an academic as well as an IT guy. And he said it very clearly. He said the machine will have a long way to go to do dialogue interpreting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe we can get to Vera, you want to say something?
Yeah, just one more thing. Two more things. I mean, there are so many things in my mind about this topic. So, because most of my clients, I feel like they need me. I know it sounds strange because when we are trained at ELTE, we are always told that we must stay as neutral as possible. And I'm really trying, but at the same time, I work, like most of my clients, most of my assignments are consecutive. And here I come back to your point. So it really matters if it's simultaneous or consecutive. And when you do consecutive, you work with vulnerable people, and these people rely on you. It can be at the court, it can be with children with special educational needs or autism spectrum disorder, or it can be other people of a vulnerable community. And it's so important that they have a human voice. I can't see it. I feel myself as a bridge in between cultures, and I think it's something that machines just cannot replicate.
Okay, very good. We talked about machine interpreting and automated interpreting, and here is my second question. Can we label automated speech-to-speech translation as interpreting, or is it only translation? I think we heard some reference to that in the first talk. So do you think that conference interpreters can be replaced in the near future by automated services? Or in what sort of settings? I think we have sort of answered that question, but if anyone has to say anything else on that.
You want to? Please start. So what I find very interesting about machine translation is that have this impression that very often it uses the same tactics I do in a booth. So for example, when I didn't catch a word or there is something I don't understand, I rely on context clues and try to guess what this element was. And I can recognize this guesswork very often in the mistakes made by machine interpreting. So I think it's a similarity between human interpreters. I think machine translation mimics very well, in a way, what we do. It's not the same thing, it's not perfect, but sometimes I think it's very similar to what we do. But usually we rely on these strategies or tactics when we are in trouble, when we can't do the verbalization, and we have to find a way to cope with the situation, and the machine does the same thing, I find.
So I think I agree that we cannot call it interpreting. I'm not sure whether we can call it translation either. I've been thinking about this morning. Mattia and I have been trying to come up with another term. We've been thinking it should be actually labeled of what it is, something like prediction. But then it was difficult to come up with something catchy that would work with prediction. So we have no good suggestion, but maybe some of you have a good suggestion. Regarding the settings, I mean, we are currently mapping out a little bit. Or do you want to say something on that? No? Okay. The use of translation app in healthcare, in which situations you use translation apps, in which you call an interpreter, and it's community interpreting, not conference interpreting, I'm aware of that. But so we see there are some situations where people are ready, willing to pay the costs of using translation apps. And I say pay the costs because it has a cost. The interaction is less fluent. It's more frustrating because you need to repeat, you need to reformulate. The app is not in a way getting you. And I'm not talking about Google Translate. Usually what we use for testing are specialized apps, I mean, that has been developed actually for healthcare. And they're not working well enough to really enable a fluent dialogue. Yeah, and we will see in some situations, of course, where it's totally impossible, where the interaction would be totally disrupted actually if you would use a translation app. And now we will see how it plays out for conference interpreting. It would be interesting to actually test different scenarios and to see there might be situations where it works sufficiently well and where you need to have just kind of a basic understanding, some comprehension, and that would be enough, and some situations where clearly it won't be enough. You certainly want to say something.
I do, but you won't be able to predict what I'm going to say, despite your intuition and whatever. There's so much agreement where many of us are in same roles, teaching professionals, and there's a lot of agreement on this panel, so I will spoil the harmony, and I absolutely don't disagree, but I'm very surprised, Marta, to hear you say that to draw attention to this similarity of what machines do. Yes, machines do make the output very fluent. They make up something rather than just leaving a gap and say, I don't know. But is that what we are doing? And the machines draw on the patterns in the database. But I would insist, and it's been mentioned several times, that what we do draws on a much broader set of resources, the reading between the lines, the knowledge of the people, the background, the purpose of the meeting. So I would actually not see that as such a parallel, maybe at the superficial level, but the way it really works, the way we use our context and situation-based knowledge is really superior to what any machine at the present stage of development could hope to have.
Just because you were asking for settings, I just saw an interesting post on LinkedIn by Fantinoli, and he mentioned that from now onwards there's now speech-to-speech translation in Zoom meetings, and also Microsoft and others have it, so team meetings, whatever, it's coming up. So it means that if we have a Zoom or a Teams meeting, everyone can basically speak their own language, and then there will be speech-to-speech translation, and apparently it's there from now onwards. So that is a situation and a setting where speech-to-speech translation is on. to what extent it works, what it does to the meetings, how it changes the overall feeling, if we come out frustrated or fine, we don't know. Whether it does away with English as a lingua franca, I have no clue. But it's here.
I will add one more thing. The International Association of Conference Interpreters, AIIC, does have recommendations for event organizers. So in which cases is it okay or recommended to use machine interpreting? And it's published on their website. You can see the checklist. It's pretty interesting. Spoiler, not in many cases very much recommended. So in case you have no panel discussion, no interactive parts, in case basic common English or other language is okay to use, and you're sure that the participants won't go using awkward or odd language or non-standard language, then it's okay to use. And there are other checklists, and it's just really interesting to go through this, and then you realize that probably there are not so many cases when it's really okay to use it.
If we move towards research and try to look at the same issue from the perspective of research, my question is whether you can mention any recent research that actually sheds some light on the positive role of humans as compared to machines. Because if we show these research results to the conference organizers, for instance, that might be a good case for us now. Can we just share any such research results or findings with our audience?
Yeah, I want to mention in that respect the chapter written by Robin Seton. Robin Seton is a very well-known interpreting studies scholar. And there is a book that has only just come out. It's the Applications of Relevance Theory to Translation and Interpreting, Perspectives on Theory, Research and Practice, edited by Fabio Alves and Fabrizio Gallai. And Robin Seton has a very nice chapter where he, from a relevance theoretic but basically pragmatic point of view and perspective, really goes into the details of what humans can bring to the table in terms of what the machine can't, and in terms of all the pragmatic phenomena and things that some of them were mentioned, like prosody or you mentioned a couple of things which just, non-verbal, yes. Or the reading between the lines or whatsoever, and he goes into details, and based on a pragmatic theoretical framework, he explains this. So this chapter I would really recommend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anybody else on this?
Maybe you want to know the name. It's a relevant theoretic perspective on machine interpreting by Robin Seton.
It's not conference interpreting, but may I? So I know that at the University of Surrey, Felix Carmel and his colleagues are running this current research project on interpreting in health environment in hospitals. And they compare how machines and how humans work when it comes to interpreting, which types of mistakes they make, and they even go to the point what losses you can have, what serious consequences you might have when you opt for the machine. I'm not daring to say any of the findings of this research project. I'm sure that it's going to be published soon. And the other one is a project of Alan Melby. He's an American, first of all, trainer, interpreter, and translator. And he was the president of the North American FIT. FIT is the International Federation of Translators, Interpreters, and Terminologists around the world. So Alan is now very enthusiastic about his project, because he's collecting the so-called near misses. I don't know if you know what near misses could be. Near misses are mistakes made by machine translation, so it's rather about translation than interpretation, but still, I think it's relevant at this point, and he wants to see what could have been the consequences if there had not been any humans to correct those mistakes, and really wants to collect like a list of practical projects like near misses. So.
Okay. I'm going to skip to go to the next question, because a recent special issue of Interpreting, the journal, issued in 2024, 26/2, was devoted to technology, and I'm going to ask the editor of the paper, Professor Pöchacker, whether he could mention any important findings. You actually wrote an article with your co-editor, an open access article about summarizing the whole history of technology in interpreting. I find it a very important paper, and whether you could just highlight any more findings that is shared in that paper.
Well, thank you for the kind words for the introductory article that we wrote. As regards the 4 or 5 papers brought together in that special issue, I actually would like to compare myself as an editor to a parent, and we love all our children equally well, and all of them are equally important, even though they turn out differently. So I would want to avoid saying, well, this paper or that paper has the more significant findings. There is great diversity. We like all of them, whether we survey conference interpreters. Damien Fan did that, about their attitudes toward taking up technology. That's very relevant to find out what the mood is and what the perceptions are. There are papers of an experimental nature focusing on computer-assisted interpreting, which is not the same as replacing interpreters by automation. So it really depends what we would be interested in. And one thing I would like to stress, though, one area of the application of technology in interpreting that is still underexplored, I think, and also underrepresented in that special issue, is a disadvantaged child there, is video remote interpreting. And it seems that everybody is so taken with the automation or computer-assisted mode of interpreting that something that was introduced quite a while ago and that is increasingly practiced and gives us more opportunities to work RSI in conference settings or video remote interpreting in community interpreting settings, but there's not that much research into this mode from the perspective of interpreters or the clients or even discourse-based analysis. So I wish we could actually also put the spotlight on this. This is covered in a book review and in a more theoretical article analyzing the notion of presence and space when we sit in front of a screen and yet want to be part of a communicative situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Catherine, you also published a paper in that edition, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah? No?
That's true.
That's true. Augmented reality. Would you like to say a few words about that paper?
Okay, so we tried this famous computer-assisted interpreting setting where we don't replace interpreters, right? Instead, interpreters are presented with translation suggestions. Typically, there would be numbers, names, technical terms. What we did, was kind of the innovation of that paper. We put the whole thing on mixed reality for a simple reason. So computer-assisted interpreting emerged with remote simultaneous interpreting. Both of them kind of go together. At least this is my analysis. And so you have all those translation suggestions on the screen. But if you are on site and you have the speaker in front of you and your laptop here, it means like you go like that, right? You look back and forth. And with mixed reality, you can put the input where you would like, right? You can put it somewhere in the space, wherever you want. And it was a lot of fun. You want me to highlight some of the
in just one sentence.
Findings? Yeah. Exactly. So I think the one comment from the interviews that struck me most was an interpreter saying, And I was more like on the computer-assisted interpreting part, not so much on mixed reality or anything. I asked her, what is the difference between you have a glossary on Excel, Word, whatever, in your some software that you're using, or you have translation suggestions popping up. And she said, well, with a glossary, I only look up what I need. So there seem to be quite a lot of implications, quite a huge effect on cognitive processing and interpreting when you need to process actually these things that pop up and that you need to integrate in your sentence somehow.
Okay. Good. In the morning, we could hear from Professor Pöchacker that, for instance, client and user satisfaction should be mapped up, and we don't have the methodology just yet. But what kinds of empirical research projects can you envisage? What would we need in this respect? Do you have any take on that?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Okay. So user expectations, I think, is important, right? What do users actually now expect from interpretations? Certainly also the impact it has on the audience in terms of effort, in terms of enjoyment maybe, these notions. And then a third area that I think can be also very important is, we just tested it in a workshop before, the interaction with avatars, right? How do you communicate with avatars? How do you kind of if you're in a conversation, can you really manage the conversation with avatars? How do they react on what you're doing? I think this is also a very exciting area of research for me.
As the microphone passes by on the way to the left-hand side, I'll just add a word. That is comprehension. Much easier, much more difficult to test than impressions, subjective perceptions, but how much of the content or the intention, intended meaning actually is grasped by our users, and that's a real challenge. But it has been met before, testing comprehension as a measure of the quality of mediation, so I think we would also venture into that direction.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize this and underline what Franz says, because we know it from English as a lingua franca, and the problem with human cognition is the good enough principle. Humans make do with, with whatever they get. And they are not so picky. As long as they understand a little bit, they go by, they think that maybe something that they haven't understood quite yet will come a little bit later, or they have a lot of background knowledge, and then via inferences they will kind of close the gaps, etc. So they have a lot of compensatory mechanisms, and even if they don't have the compensatory mechanism, they will do with what they get. And that used to be a problem with English as a lingua franca. This is why English as a lingua franca could make the world go round as it did. And this is the same with machine interpreting. So at least perhaps we should look into when and in what settings, like Ann-Kathrin mentioned the AMIT project, which we have at ZHW, in what settings can you make do with translation apps, and where would you need video interpreting or telephone interpreting or on-site interpreting? And similarly, in what settings, in what scenarios and environments can you make do with machine interpreting, and where would you really need the human interpreter? And that not only from a perspective of, what are user expectations or what are they happy with, but in terms of what really gets the purpose of the communication that is set up going, because you usually invest a lot of money into any kind of event, and then you want this to have a certain result. Is the result guaranteed?
Okay, the next question on my pre-prepared question list was whether you could recommend any recent publications on interpreting and technology, and actually I prepared a few slides on that for your information, because Routledge has been very active, and Michaela, it's your name comes up first in the Routledge Handbook of Interpreting and Cognition. There are 25 chapters. So that's one handbook, and there is another one with 22 chapters, the Routledge Handbook of Interpreting Technology and AI. That's a very recent one as well, with Bianca Prandi's KI tools and some. I couldn't copy the whole content page because you wouldn't be able to see anything. I just copied the ones that I thought would be most interesting. And there is a new, also a Routledge edition, Technology and Interpreting, lots of Chinese authors. David Sawyer is also there, Navigating the Digital Age. And there is another one about translation studies, so more like on the translation front, the editors are almost the same names. And yeah, these are the ones that I just wanted to share with you. And I think with that we move into training, because we are all representing training institutions. And the big question is how we can go with the flow and do something in training with a restricted budget, I would say, with all these technological devices. So what can we do in interpreting training? How we already use virtual classes, speech repositories, all kinds of we have our blended learning scheme. For instance, we have some of our classes over Zoom so that our students will learn how to navigate these digital tools. But yeah, what else do we need to incorporate and how? Do you have any take on that?
So maybe I will be a bit controversial, but I think that in interpreter training, the most important thing is to teach the basic skills. And for me, the biggest problem nowadays is that students struggle with concentration when they have to concentrate for several minutes or 1.5 hours. And it just happened to me last week that I asked a question in French to a student, and then she answered me in Hungarian that, sorry teacher, that I'm so tired, I didn't even understand the question. So I think that's our main point now, to have the basic skills. And then we can pass on to all these technological devices. And there is another question that must be asked, if it is really useful for them, because a lot of application works in a subscription basis. And if we don't pay for them, maybe students can't afford subscribing to these applications. And then will they use these services in the future, especially that very often clients don't accept any digital tools that were not developed by them for privacy and confidentiality reasons. So we really have to think about the utility, and I would like to emphasize the importance of basic skills.
So did Edina with translation yesterday, I have to tell you.
Yeah. Your colleague. Yes, the same mafia. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, basic skills. In Winter 2, actually, there was a first phase, basically, where it was all about how do we use all these tools, then how do we use them smartly, efficiently, and so on. But I think what I find important is that it's not only about using tools. Right now, we're in a position where something is imposed on us. It's also imposed on our students, right? So here are the tools, now use them, you learn how to use them, etc. But I think what I find really important is tools, especially digital tools, is something that you shape. We call it software development. Usually there is a phase of requirement engineering, and then there's a development phase, and usually that goes kind of in several rounds. And I find it important because it also gives the students back a sense of agency. So right now we're teaching interdisciplinary course at our university, where we have our language students together with informatics students. And together they do a requirement engineering course. So our language students, they come with some idea based on their domain knowledge for an app, software that they would like to see, that would help them, that would assist them. And they're working with their colleagues on the requirements, software architecture. That's more like the informatics students. Our students are more like are working more on a mock-up and usability and so on. But it gives them back some sense of, hey, this is not, there's a point to all of it. Because before that, they're saying, okay, what's the point? Why should I learn even the basic skills? AI can do it even better than me. But now there's something like a valorization, actually, of their knowledge. And this is something that I really love observing.
Here we go again. Marta, I find myself fully agreeing with you, of course. and talk about basic skills, but maybe we can add another dimension that is fundamental skills. I know in the semantics of basic and fundamental could be the same, but what I would mean that initially, yes, it's the basic skills, and then we do introduce them to the availability of some tools. They should know what it means to use speech recognition and all of that. But then actually toward the second part of their specialized training, let's say in conference interpreting, I think there is a need to expose them more to the situatedness. And that is where we don't always do so well at this point, because we use speeches, that speech repository collections, so much is available. But how often do we offer our students a situation where there is somebody trying to get a point across, somebody responding, criticizing? This panel, for instance, could be good training, because you have to sense the meeting, who is where and who wants to get what across. And that is very difficult to build into training. So more like internship-based or exposure to real, sometimes demanding communication situations, and which has nothing to do with technology and tools, but it's sensing the meeting, listening between the lines. And how do you teach that in the classroom only, when there is no audience, nobody to respond? So that is a challenge, I think, for training.
I would like in training also to see that interpreters are told how amazing they are. Because I've seen, interpreting is a lot about training women. And women are in discontinuous life trajectories. So, they have children, they do this, that, and the other. They don't always follow a career from point one. And I have seen so many people with a master's in conference interpreting ending up in all kinds of fields, because they are so quick in the uptake. They have such excellent analytical skills. They know about languages. They know about they have intercultural competence. They are just very fast. They are just intelligent guys in every aspect. And by being a trained interpreter, you just learn so many things that you can then transfer into other areas. And I would just like to encourage people to, even if you feel that perhaps the machine might take over and you might not end up being an interpreter, if you do this training, if you end up graduating as a conference interpreter, the world is open to you, for you. You can do so many things. You have so many skills. So I would anytime recommend anybody to go for that kind of training, and whether or not you will then do interpreting.
And we haven't even been talking about soft skills and how what a broad range of soft skills they could learn. Well, Ildiko was kind enough to indicate that our time is sort of up, but I would like to ask Vera our final question about the role of professional associations. You mentioned FIT and AIC, that they have sort of recommendations, but to date there is not yet a widely adopted certification standard in connection with how interpreters should be using AI tools. Now, what can be the role of, well, not only a Hungarian association, but maybe an international one on that front?
I think what we could do, we think that this international community, so we are a member organization of FIT, which is the International Federation of Translators and Interpreters, and I think they have great position papers, for instance, on the use of AI in translation and in interpretation. These position papers come out every 6 months, every year, more or less, so they're always fresh. The last one just came out a couple of days ago. And based on that and the draft guidelines and their recommendations, I think we can build on something. So we can adopt and implement these recommendations and guidelines, and I hope that could be a support for our members, and through our members to our clients as well, to speak very, very broadly.
Okay, and just to wrap up the conversation and conclude with what we discussed as question 1, what concrete benefits do you think human-in-the-loop interpreting may bring to clients, interpreters, and end users? And I think, Professor Pöchacker, you might have a concluding opinion on that?
You're taking a risk, Chila. You're taking a risk because I must admit I'm unhappy with the phrasing human in the loop when we talk about interpreting. Because to me, human in the loop suggests a machine-dominated environment, and somewhere at the end or wherever there's a human involved. So interpreting is human. We don't need to even say human interpreting. When we push for interpreting, we know what we're talking about. It's meaning making, it's contextualized, situated, and all that. I might add, but that's also on a negative note again, that the developers and the industry marketing now these speech-to-speech translation tools are aware of the limitations and are aware of all the things that we have listed that are the assets of interpreters, and they have, or at least it's been conveyed to me, that one of their visions is to have interpreters prep the software. Mm-hmm. So for every meeting or assignment, bring in the interpreters and their knowledge and their expectations, what might probably come up in terms of terminology and proper names, and feed that into the system so that the systems can do even better. It's for our colleagues in the professional associations to consider whether we should encourage our members to work with the industry to improve the systems or not, but it's on a larger level a political decision. But so many things are political these days, so that'll be my final word.
That's not a very positive tone either, or note to finish on, but that's the reality. And unless anybody has any other thoughts on that, thank you very much for your contributions. I think it was very interesting. I hope the audience thinks the same. And I'm sorry to say we have no further time for questions, because we will need to give the opportunity for our students to prepare a little bit. And then at 6 o'clock, they are going to present their pitch or pitches, their presentations based on 5 o'clock, sorry, 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, so it means that they have very little time left. So thank you very much for the participation, and once again for my panelists to be here and provide their ideas and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.